I sent my daughter $800 every month for 6 years. Then she banned me from Christmas, and then I never expected retirement to feel so hollow. After 43 years on the factory floor stitching seams till my fingers blistered, I figured I'd earn some rest. Not luxury, not even close, but a bit of breathing room. A small pension came through, just enough to cover groceries, gas, and the occasional trip to the town thrift store. I live modestly in a one-bedroom apartment just outside Kansas City. Nothing special, but it's mine, and I keep it clean. My daughter Tessa got married back in 1997, young and hopeful and absolutely convinced she'd stumbled into her forever. Nolan was charming then, respectful, eager, maybe even a little grateful. He worked odd construction jobs, barely enough to scrape by, but I kept my doubts quiet. I didn't want to be the mother who meddled, especially not when Tessa looked at him the way I used to look at her father, before life wore the shine off. They couldn't afford the wedding they wanted, and I'd just gotten my early retirement notice, so I pitched in. Nothing fancy, just enough to help them feel proud of it. A rented hall, a local band, finger food from the grocery catering tray. When it came time to buy their first home, a 3-bedroom boxy little place with green shutters and too much carpet, I did more than pitch in. I emptied almost everything I had saved. I'd spent years socking away 20 here, 40 there, skipping out on vacations, avoiding takeout. I was going to use that money to finally fix my teeth, or maybe take the train up to Oregon like I'd always dreamed. Instead, I signed the check, co-signed the mortgage, and asked only one thing: to never be made to feel like a guest in that house. Nolan smiled, nodded, thanked me. Tessa cried. "This is your home too, Mom," she said, wrapping her arms around me in the middle of the empty living room. "You can come here anytime." I believed her. After they settled in, things moved fast. Tessa got a job substitute teaching while Nolan floated between painting gigs and side projects. The money never stretched far. I could hear it in her voice during those late-night phone calls. Her laugh grew thinner, her patience shorter. Groceries went up, car repairs piled on. And then Wyatt came along, 5 weeks early with lungs that needed extra care and formula that cost more than my entire pantry. I didn't wait for her to ask. I just started wiring them $800 every month like clockwork. No questions, no lectures. I told myself it was the least I could do. After all, I had help when Tessa was born. My mother stayed with us for nearly a year, cooking and folding diapers and walking the floor while I recovered. It's what mothers do, isn't it? They step in. That monthly transfer became part of my routine. I'd walk down to the credit union every third Tuesday, fill out the same slip, and watch the teller type in the numbers. I never told my friends, not the full amount anyway. I'd say, just helping a little, and leave it at that. But my neighbor Rosie found out one day when I was complaining about the ATM being down. She gave me a look I didn't love. "You're too good a mother," she said, not entirely kindly. "What if Nolan gets too used to the handout?" I laughed it off, said, "What's the point of keeping score with family?" But the question wormed its way into my head and stayed there, quiet but persistent. I kept visiting, never uninvited, but never exactly welcomed with open arms either. Tessa would say, "Of course, Mom, stay a few nights," but there was always a shadow behind the words. The guest room, the one I helped pay for, was usually tidy but felt like a storage closet. Nolan never made me feel at home. He'd nod, ask if I wanted coffee, then vanish to the garage. He never once offered to help carry my bags. Still, I ignored it. I brought Wyatt his favorite books, baked apple bars for Tessa, bought Nolan that fancy dark roast he liked. I told myself I was imagining the distance. Families go through phases, right? Maybe I was being sensitive. But when I think back now, I can see the shift was already starting. Tessa's texts got shorter. She stopped calling just to chat. Holidays turned into logistical puzzles instead of celebrations. Still, I pressed on, convinced love meant never noticing the ways you weren't being loved back. I never brought it up. I thought silence made things easier. But now I wonder, did my silence make it easier for them to forget who I was? Last autumn, as the air turned sharp and the supermarket brought out the cranberries, I decided I'd spend Christmas at their place. I'd already bought Wyatt a blue flannel robe with dinosaurs stitched on the pockets. I'd knitted Tessa a soft cashmere scarf in her favorite shade of plum, and for Nolan, I ordered a tin of that expensive Oregon coffee he liked. I even baked sugar cookies shaped like stars and tied up a tiny bottle of homemade elderberry syrup I'd been saving. 2 bags packed, gifts wrapped in gold and pine green. I zipped everything up with a humming heart. I imagined the tree glowing in the corner, Wyatt tearing open boxes, Nolan joking about how strong the coffee was, and Tessa smiling with a full plate in her hands. It was the same dream I'd held for years, the quiet hope that maybe this time, I'd truly feel like I belonged again. But life doesn't always follow the story we tell ourselves. And that call, God, that call, was the first crack loud enough to hear. 3 days before my bus was set to leave for San Diego, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, trying on the same burgundy blouse I'd ironed for church every December for the past 5 years. It still fit, a little looser now, but neat. I'd paired it with a silver necklace Wyatt had made for me out of beads 2 Christmases ago. I looked tired, sure, but happy, nervous maybe, but that came with age. My bags were zipped. The presents were wrapped. I'd even made a cranberry loaf to bring in a Tupperware I'd saved from Thanksgiving. I had everything ready. Then the phone rang. I knew it was Tessa before I answered, her number blinking across the screen with that same name I'd dialed so many times I didn't even have to look anymore. Her voice was softer than usual, uncertain in a way that made my stomach knot almost instantly. "Hey, Mom, do you have a minute?" she asked, like she was easing into something she didn't want to say. I froze mid-step, holding the phone with both hands. "Of course, sweetheart. Is something wrong?" I asked, already knowing it was. "Well," she said, stalling. "Nolan wants to talk to you for a second." There was no warning, no explanation, just a quick shuffle, and then his voice was there, smooth and rehearsed. "Hi there, June," he said, like he was calling from a call center rather than speaking to the woman who'd practically kept his household afloat for 6 years straight. "Listen, about Christmas," he started, then paused like he was working from a script he didn't believe in. "This year might not be the best time for a visit. My folks are coming in, and well," he let that hang like a string between us. "We've only got the 3 bedrooms, you know. My mom and dad, they've gotten picky in their old age. They each need their own room to sleep well. Light sleepers. Travel wears them out." I gripped the arm of my chair as he spoke, staring at the suitcases I'd packed with so much care. I waited, giving him space to correct himself, to offer the couch or the floor, anything that made it seem like I was still welcome. When he said nothing, I jumped in. I could sleep on the sofa. Honestly, I've done it plenty. I can even bring my own pillow and blanket. I forced a little laugh, like this was something we could joke about. But he wasn't laughing. In fact, his voice got tighter. "June, I just think it'd be too crowded. You don't need to put yourself through that. You deserve to relax too. The living room's going to be a zoo. And honestly, Tessa and I are both kind of maxed out. We were hoping for a quiet holiday this year, something low-key, just us and the folks. It's been a long year." I didn't say anything right away. I could feel my heart beating hard and slow in my chest like it was trying to understand what the hell was happening. The silence must have made him nervous because he started again, softer this time. "You could maybe go stay with Gordon for the weekend? He's close by, and his place is always cheerful, right? You love his kids." I couldn't respond. My mouth went dry. Nolan's voice sounded polite, maybe even gentle, but I could hear it beneath the words. A finality, a message dressed in kindness but packed with coldness. "Don't come. You'd be in the way." I asked to speak to Tessa again, and he passed the phone over. She sounded like she'd been holding her breath the entire time. "Mom, please don't take it personally," she said, her voice trembling like it might crack under the weight of her own guilt. "Nolan's just stressed, and his parents haven't traveled in years, so he's anxious about how they'll handle everything. You know how they are. They need their space, and the house, it's just tight." She never said the words outright. She never had to. I could hear Nolan in the background clearing his throat. A quiet little sound, but it told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't free to speak. She wasn't free to push back. I ended the call calmly. I even told her I understood. But the moment I set the phone down, I sat in the same spot for nearly an hour, staring into the corner of the room like I'd lost something that couldn't be named. I kept seeing the holiday bags lined up neatly by the door, topped with ribbons and bows that now looked foolish, excessive even. I had knitted Wyatt a winter cap shaped like a dinosaur head with felt teeth around the brim. I had wrapped his toys in cartoon paper and printed out a crossword puzzle he could do with me by the fire. And now I was being asked not to come because two people who'd been healthy enough to vacation in Sedona last spring suddenly needed their own beds for Christmas? I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch with a blanket over my knees, flipping through a magazine I couldn't focus on. Around dawn, I picked up my phone again. There was one name I hadn't thought about in months: Clara, Nolan's niece. We'd met once, years ago, at a 4th of July cookout. She was sweet and kind, maybe 25 now, active on social media. We'd followed each other back then, mostly out of politeness. I hadn't messaged her since. But now, I typed slowly and deliberately. Hi Clara, hope you're doing well. Just wondering, are Nolan's parents still planning to visit for Christmas? I might drop off something if they aren't coming. She replied 20 minutes later, bubbly and warm. Oh yes, they're coming to San Diego. So excited. Then off to Arizona right after for a little desert trip. I stared at the screen, rereading those sentences 3 times. So they were traveling, just not to Tessa's house. The whole story about needing 2 rooms and delicate sleep was a lie. A stupid, flimsy lie told by a man who didn't have the guts to say what he meant. I wasn't invited. Not because there wasn't space. Because they didn't want me there. That realization hit harder than I expected. I thought I'd cry or throw something. But instead, I felt something colder settle into my chest. I felt it tighten like a steel knot. Not anger, not even sadness, something worse. That bone-deep kind of humiliation you can't shake off with time. That slow understanding that all your effort, all your sacrifice, has been quietly erased while you weren't looking. I didn't call again. I didn't text. But I canceled the wire transfer. That $800 had gone out every month without fail. And for the first time in years, I let the calendar flip without signing the slip at the credit union. I didn't make an announcement. I didn't warn them. I just waited. 5 days after the usual transfer date, the phone rang. It was Tessa. Her voice was cheerful in that way people get when they're trying too hard. Hey Mom, just wanted to check in. How have you been feeling? It's gotten colder, huh? Don't forget your gloves if you're going out. I kept my voice calm. I'm fine. Thanks for checking. She talked around the edges for a while. Asked about my neighbor's dog. Brought up some new bakery opening down the road. And then, just as I knew she would, her tone changed slightly. By the way, did you forget to send the money this month? I waited. I let the silence grow heavy between us before I answered. No, I didn't forget. The pause on her end was deafening. I could hear the air catch in her throat. I spoke slowly, letting every word sink in. I just realized something. You and Nolan have plenty of help. His parents, his cousins. You're surrounded by support. So I figured you wouldn't need it anymore. You said the house was too tight for guests. So I'm respecting that now. She didn't say anything for a while. Then her voice came back, thin and quiet. Mom, please don't make this about the money. And I didn't. Because it never was. The silence that followed my reply could have cracked glass. I could practically hear her blinking, scrambling for how to respond without admitting the truth outright. The tone she slipped into next was that familiar, weary blend of guilt and justification I'd come to know too well. Things have just been tight lately, Mom. You know how it is with Wyatt's school, the water heater breaking, Nolan's truck acting up again. It's been a rough stretch. We're really trying to keep it together over here. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. I just listened, the same way I used to when she was a child trying to talk her way out of a poor report card. The same gentle spin, just a bigger mess. Then she said it, as I knew she would. We just didn't expect the transfer to stop, that's all. It really threw us off. I closed my eyes, leaned back in my chair, and let that word sink in. Transfer. That's what it was now. Not help, not support, not love. Just a transaction. A silent contract they'd never had to sign, because I kept it alive all on my own. I didn't forget. I repeated, this time more slowly. I just thought maybe it was time we all reevaluated who's supposed to be helping who. If your little family is so strong and private and independent, maybe it's best I stop interfering with that. Right. She didn't answer. Not because she didn't understand, but because she did. Later that night, Nolan called. I let it ring twice before picking up. His voice was sharp from the first word, like he'd been rehearsing this conversation in the mirror. June, I'm going to say this once. You don't get to weaponize money against your own daughter. If you've got a problem with me, fine, but cutting off your support out of spite? That's cruel. I stayed quiet, letting him talk. He clearly needed the drama more than I did. You can't just change your mind after all these years. That money has been part of our budget. We count on it. That's not a luxury, it's a commitment. I sat there listening, stunned by the sheer gall of a man who had spent years avoiding eye contact with me in his own kitchen. The same man who pretended my homemade soups were too salty and rolled his eyes when Wyatt wanted to show me his crayon drawings. The same man who smiled as he locked the door on me that Christmas. Now he was demanding what he believed he was owed, like I was a malfunctioning ATM. You told me not to interfere, I said, my voice low and even. You made it perfectly clear there wasn't room for me in your home, your plans, or your idea of the holidays. So I'm not interfering. I'm stepping back. Fully, cleanly, permanently. For a moment, he didn't respond. Then his voice cracked open into something colder. You're punishing us for setting boundaries, he snapped. That's not love. That's manipulation. I laughed then, quiet and dry, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. Boundaries? I repeated. You mean the boundary where I paid your mortgage every month, but had to wait outside like a delivery man? You mean the kind where you took my money, but didn't want my presence? Don't worry, Nolan. I hear you now. And you're absolutely right. Boundaries matter. So I'm setting one too. I didn't wait for whatever else he was going to say. I hung up. And just like that, it was done. The phone didn't ring again for 3 more days. When it finally did, it was Tessa again. She didn't mention the money this time. She asked if I'd made any New Year's resolutions, if I tried that new bakery downtown, if I'd thought about repainting the guest room I never used. We danced around the crater for 10 minutes before she finally said it. Mom, this isn't how I wanted things to go. I believed her, but I also knew she'd chosen not to stop it. That mattered more. January passed. Then February. No transfer. No visit. No apology. I thought maybe that would be it, that the silence would just grow longer and colder until one day I realized it had frozen over completely. But I was wrong. One afternoon in March, I ran into my neighbor Jean, who always seemed to know more about everyone's business than anyone else in the building. She mentioned, casually, that she'd seen a moving truck outside a rental across town with Nolan's name on the side. Didn't he work for a delivery company? She asked. Or was that just a side gig? I shook my head, said I didn't keep up with him much these days. That night, I opened my laptop and did the thing I swore I'd never do. I looked them up on social media. Tessa hadn't posted in weeks. Nolan's account, though, it was public. A mess of angry political takes, gym selfies, and passive-aggressive quotes about loyalty and betrayal. One post caught my eye immediately. A photo of their now-empty living room with a caption that read, "When people turn their backs, you find out who your real family is." I clicked out of the browser without another thought. A week later, I got a text from Tessa. "Do you think we could talk?" It read. I waited a full day before replying. About what? She didn't answer for 2 more days. Then finally, she called. I almost didn't pick up, but something in me wanted to hear how far this would go. She didn't sound angry. She sounded tired. Flat. Like someone who'd run out of excuses to polish. "We're not doing great," she admitted. "Nolan's between jobs. Wyatt's been sick again. We're behind on the gas bill, the rent. It's been a lot." I said nothing. She waited, probably hoping I'd jump in and offer something, anything. When I didn't, she pushed forward. "I just want to know, do you hate me?" That's when something in my chest broke. Not from anger, but from exhaustion. I didn't hate her. I just didn't recognize her anymore. "I don't hate you," I said finally. "But I can't keep pretending that what we had is what we still have. I gave because I loved you. You took because you needed it. But somewhere along the line, it stopped being help and started being expected. Like a utility. Like I was a bill to pay." Her breath hitched. She didn't deny it. She just said, I didn't know how to stop needing you. That was the closest thing to honesty I'd heard in months. I need time, I said. And maybe you do too. We hung up quietly. Not angry, not sad. Just still. That week, I started clearing out the guest room. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. I boxed up the old toys Wyatt had left behind. I folded the spare linens. I opened the windows and let the air sweep through. The room didn't feel like a memory anymore. It felt like a space again, clean, undecided, full of possibility. And for the first time in what felt like years, I walked past the room without pausing. I made myself a cup of tea, sat on the couch, and watched the light move across my floor. No one was coming. And somehow, that felt okay. The first time I saw Wyatt again, it was because Nolan dropped him off like he was returning a library book. It was a Wednesday morning just before sunrise, the doorbell ringing like a hammer. I opened the door still wearing my apron, half expecting it to be a neighbor, only to see Nolan standing there, arms full of a bundled, flushed child, his face twisted with annoyance like even the weight of his own son had become an inconvenience. "He's running a fever," he said without preamble. "Tessa said you'd know what to do." And just like that, he shoved Wyatt into my arms and walked off, not even waiting to see if I had medicine, blankets, or the strength to handle it. Wyatt whimpered softly against my chest, his skin burning through the sleeves of his too thin jacket. He smelled faintly of cough, syrup, and sweat, and I could feel the heat of his fever radiating off him like a furnace. His lips were cracked, his eyelids heavy, and there were traces of tears dried on his cheeks. I called for Tessa, louder than I meant to, and she came rushing down the hallway, barefoot and frantic, still pulling her sweater over her head. When she saw him in my arms, she crumbled like wet paper, letting out a sob that punched a hole straight through me. "What happened?" she cried, already peeling off his jacket, her hands trembling so badly she could barely work the zipper. "Why didn't he tell me it was this bad?" Her voice broke as she pressed her cheek to Wyatt's damp forehead. "Oh baby, I'm so sorry. Mommy's here now." I didn't say anything. I just turned and headed straight for the kitchen, already boiling water, already pulling out the old medicine I kept tucked in the cabinet for emergencies, even though I'd told myself months ago I wouldn't do this again. Once Wyatt was clean, wrapped in flannel, and drifting into shallow sleep with a wet cloth on his forehead, the house grew quiet. Tessa sat curled on the couch, shoulders hunched, face pale with guilt. She stared at the carpet like it held answers. "He didn't even ask if I could take the day off work," she muttered, more to herself than to me. "He just dropped him off and left. No warning, no diapers, not even a goodbye." I stayed silent. I'd learned that some truths hit harder when left to echo on their own. That evening, after Wyatt's fever broke and his breathing softened into that even, shallow rhythm I remembered from when he was a baby, Tessa sat at the kitchen table, nursing a mug of tea she hadn't touched. "I left him," she said suddenly, her voice flat, but her eyes too wide, too alert. "It's over." I looked at her for a long time before answering. "You sure?" She nodded, not fast, not defiantly, just once, like the decision had already been made, and all that was left now was to survive it. "He threw a plate last week," she said, her voice quieter now, more fragile. "Said I was just like you. Useless, dramatic, always making problems." Her mouth twisted like she'd tasted something sour. Then he slapped the divorce papers on the table like he was handing me a takeout menu. Told me he should have listened to his father about me. I didn't gasp. I didn't rage. I just reached across the table and poured her another cup. Because there's nothing left to say when someone finally sees what you saw years ago. "I didn't come here to beg for money," she said after a while. "I know what I did. I know I didn't defend you. I let things slide because I thought that was easier. I thought if I kept the peace, he'd calm down, that the marriage would hold together a little longer." She stared into her tea, fingers wrapped tight around the mug. "But peace bought with silence isn't peace at all, is it?" I didn't answer. I just handed her the honey and sat beside her in the quiet. The next day, she started looking for work. Not because I told her to, because she knew it was time. I heard her fumbling through phone interviews in the other room, trying to remember how to talk about herself without saying, "I'm just a mom," or I used to help my husband with invoices. At night, she'd sit on the edge of the couch with Wyatt curled into her side, the TV flickering silently in front of them. She didn't ask me for help, but she accepted it when I offered. One morning over breakfast, she asked, "Do you think I was always like this?" I stirred my coffee, watching the cream swirl into pale clouds. "I think you were scared," I said. "I think you got too used to people catching you before you hit the ground." She looked down, nodded slowly, and then whispered, "I don't want to be that kind of woman anymore." She found a job 2 weeks later, front desk at a secondhand furniture store run by a retired teacher who didn't care that she hadn't worked in years. "She's not warm," Tessa told me after her first shift, "but she's fair. She gets stuff done. Reminds me of you." I smiled, but said nothing. Wyatt's fever faded. Tessa's steps grew steadier. And little by little, our silences stopped feeling like walls and started feeling like breath. One night she sat beside me after dinner, folding laundry in a rhythm that almost matched mine. "Do you want me to leave soon?" she asked without looking up. I paused before answering. "If you're ready," I said, "but not because I'm asking." She moved into a small apartment 3 blocks from Wyatt's school. Just a 2-room place with old windows and creaky floors, but she paid for the deposit herself, and when she handed me the key back to my guest room, her hand didn't shake. "I'm not asking you to babysit," she said. "I'm just saying the door's open, if you ever want to visit." I nodded, didn't say anything, because some things don't need to be said twice. That night, after they left, I sat in the living room and looked around at the quiet. It wasn't empty. It was mine. I brewed a pot of tea, sat in my chair by the window, and let the stillness settle in my chest like snow. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anything. Spring came in slow this year, as if it, too, was unsure whether the world had earned softness again. I spent my mornings on the balcony, coaxing new life from planters that had barely survived the winter. The herbs came back first, stubborn little things, and then the marigolds, bold and bright, like they were daring me to believe in warmth again. Inside, the quiet held steady. It didn't feel like loneliness anymore. It felt like air, like breathing. I had space again, space in the drawers, space on the walls, space inside my chest where the heaviness used to live. Tessa visited every few days. Not to ask for anything, not to unload, just to be there. Sometimes she'd bring Wyatt with her, sometimes not. She no longer walked in with that soft, guilty voice of someone trying to pre-apologize for existing. Now she knocked. Now she waited. That small difference meant more to me than 100 late-night phone calls ever did. One afternoon, she arrived with a bag of groceries, not because I'd asked, but because she'd noticed I was running low on rice. "I got the kind you like," she said, placing it gently on the counter. "The long-grain brown, not the sticky stuff." I thanked her without ceremony, and we unpacked it together in silence. That, too, was new. The quiet between us wasn't tension anymore. It was comfort, a kind of shared understanding that didn't need constant explanation. Wyatt had started drawing more lately. He'd hand me crooked little sketches every time he came over, me with big glasses, a flower pot for hair, always smiling. I taped them on the fridge even when they curled at the edges or bled through the paper. He'd beam every time, proud as if I were the president and he'd just gifted me a portrait. "I made you tall this time," he said once, pointing at a stick figure with limbs too long. "Because you're strong." Sometimes, Tessa stayed for dinner. She'd help me chop vegetables, still clumsy with the knife, but no longer asking me to do it for her. One night, as we stood at the sink washing dishes together, she said quietly, "I still don't know how I let it get so far. I think I kept waiting for Nolan to wake up one day and remember who he used to be. But he never did, and I never made him. I didn't rush to comfort her. I just handed her the dish rag and let her say it out loud. Sometimes, speaking the truth is more powerful than anything anyone else can offer you." She worked most days now, came home tired but not defeated. She no longer complained about her feet or her boss. She talked about Wyatt's schoolwork, the new woman who joined the shop, the recipe she wanted to try for lentil soup. Her voice had changed. There was weight in it now. Not heaviness, but purpose. For the first time in a long while, she was grounded in something real. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was watching her life fall apart. I felt like I was watching her build something. I kept volunteering at the community center. The young women in the sewing group started calling me Miss June, which made me laugh every single time. I taught them how to hem old skirts, how to reinforce threadbare coats, how to turn curtains into aprons. But really, I think what they wanted most was someone who looked them in the eye and didn't flinch. Someone who'd seen life hollow you out and still show up the next day with a measuring tape and a smile. One evening, as we folded fabric scraps into neat piles, one of the girls asked me, "Do you have family, Miss June?" I didn't pause. "Yes," I said, but I had to learn how to love them without losing myself. She didn't ask more, but she nodded like she understood exactly what that meant. Tessa never asked for money again. Not once. And I never brought it up. That unspoken understanding became the backbone of what we were rebuilding. One night, as I was helping Wyatt with his homework, she watched us from the kitchen and said, "I still don't deserve your kindness." I looked at her and shook my head. It's not about deserving. It's about starting over without pretending nothing happened. Eventually, she told me she'd given up her share of the old house. Nolan wanted to keep it, even though he couldn't afford it. "Let him try," she said with a shrug. "He always swore it was his castle. Now he can clean the moat." I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to. The act of letting go, of finally releasing her hold on a dream that had become a trap, was enough. That's what growth really looks like, not declarations, but decisions. When she moved the last of her things into the new apartment, I helped her unpack one final box. Inside were some of the old Christmas ornaments I'd given her years ago, the ones she once said didn't match her decor. Now, she handled each one like it was glass. "I think I see things differently now," she said. "Not just what I had, but what I nearly lost." Before I left that night, Wyatt hugged me tight and whispered, "Can we come see you tomorrow?" I smiled, ruffled his hair, and told him, "If your mama's not working, I'll make blueberry pancakes." His eyes lit up, and he ran to tell Tessa. She smiled, soft and tired, but full of something stronger than gratitude. She was proud. On the walk home, the streetlights flickered in that familiar amber glow, casting long shadows that didn't feel as dark as they used to. I walked slowly, letting the air settle in my lungs. I realized then that the pain hadn't gone, not entirely, but it had stopped defining me. I had mourned the mother I'd been, the silence I'd endured, and the love I'd poured out like water into a cracked pot. But now, I was no longer trying to glue anything back together. I was learning to build something new, something sturdier. I don't know what our future holds. Maybe Tessa will stumble again. Maybe Wyatt will grow up and forget the drawings and the pancakes. Maybe this piece will stretch or break. But I know this much. Whatever comes next, I'll meet it standing. Because I am not just someone's mother, not just a wallet, not just a place to land when things fall apart. I am June. I have a name that belongs to me and a life that I'm finally living with both hands open, not clenched into fists of worry or sacrifice. I love my daughter. I love my grandson. But now I also love myself enough to draw the line and keep it standing. And that, after everything, is enough.